Have you ever wondered what happens to your pets after they have passed away? Do they just vanish or continue their journey somewhere else? You see, to most of us, pets are more than animals. They are family. And by that fact alone, losing them can be one of the worst things that could happen to any one of us. In this video, we'll be dealing with that million-dollar question: what happens when pets die? Stay with us until the end as we try to untangle the scientific, spiritual, and emotional viewpoints to provide the answer to this deep question. The unique bond between humans and pets, a relationship between humans and animals, brings under its purview everything from early domestication of dogs through the role of cats in ancient Egypt. Obviously, such a bond is not only one of survival or utility, but an intensely emotional relationship. According to Dr. John Bradshaw, an ethologist, biologist, and author of the book The Animals Among Us, the relationship between humans and animals is based on companionship, emotional support, and unconditional love. This would, in fact, prepare the ground for laid-on grief after the death of a pet. Research on the human-animal bond indicates that the attachment of humans to their pets taps into exactly the same brain circuits that are active in human-to-human relationships. The work of neurobiologist Jaak Panksepp on the emotional lives of animals indicates that feelings in animals, especially social animals like dogs and cats, have much in common with feelings in humans. Humans and their pets, Panksepp says, are wired to take care of each other in ways that go beyond utility. Attachment theory, while developed as a psychological model to explain bonds between humans, has been applied to relationships with pets. A study published in Anthrozoös indeed says that pets often serve as attachment figures and provide comfort, security, and a sense of well-being. Thus, the loss of a pet also means the loss of an attachment figure. That is why many people show deep-seated grief, sometimes even more than from the loss of a human loved one. What does science have to say about life after death? On a strictly scientific plane, death is the cessation of biological functions. Whenever a pet dies, it commences to decompose in the physical body. The cells have stopped regenerating, the brain stops working, and the normal process of decomposition starts within the body. As much as this explanation from a scientific point of view describes what happens to the body, it doesn't address spiritual or emotional aspects of death and opens the door to more profound philosophical and theological reflections. Consciousness is perhaps one of the most elusive concepts facing both scientists and philosophers. Among the animals, particularly mammals, it is evidenced to possess a level of consciousness, though the extent may be in some quarters debated. Neurologist Antonio Damasio describes consciousness in animals as a kind of awareness, though it may not be quite as advanced as the human type of self-awareness. There are philosophers, such as David Chalmers, who have argued that consciousness is not necessarily all tied into the physical brain. This opens up possibilities beyond the physical death. If there is some non-material aspect to consciousness, then in some form it can continue on. For pets, that means their consciousness or soul can transcend the physical body, depending on what one believes. Some scientific theories of life suggest that energy in some form persists after death. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed from one form to another. Again, though this doesn't prove the existence of any type of afterlife in any normal interpretation of such a concept, it does provide an interesting opening for one to at least consider the possibility that the life force could carry on in some manner or other. The Bible and animals, a closer look. While the Bible does address many instances of animals, it never answers what happens to them after they die. However, there are several biblical principles that can help guide our understanding. Genesis 2:7 says God breathed the breath of life into man, and man became a living being. The same phrase describes the animals in Genesis 1:30 and Genesis 6:17. As Dr. Richard Bauckham puts it, this similarity suggests animals share in the life-giving breath of God, meaning that animals are more than just physical beings. They too are animated with a divine spark, like humans, yet the Bible also distinguishes humans from animals. It says that humans were created in the image of God, Genesis 1:26-27, which many theologians have interpreted as giving humans a unique spiritual dimension. While all the animals share the breath of life, they are not said to bear the image of God, which has inspired disagreement over the nature of their souls. Noah's Ark dramatically underscores the value of animals within God's creation. God commands Noah to save not only human beings from the flood, but also animals, indicating that animals are valued in their own right by God. Based on this passage, the theologian John Wesley drew the conclusion that animals must somehow be included in God's plan of redemption, though he drew back from the conclusion that animals have immortal souls. Still, the compassionate view of animals by Wesley has called others to take this a step further, to wonder if perhaps the animals could be included in this new creation promised through the Bible. Theological debates on animal souls, the question of whether animals have souls, and if so, what the nature of those souls might be, theologians throughout history have debated within a Christian context. The Bible gives few direct answers, leaving theologians to infer meaning from broader biblical principles. St. Augustine thought that animals had souls, but not, of course, a rational soul as man did. For Augustine, the soul was the instrument of reason, and since animals were without reason, then their souls must have been very different from those of humanity. Aquinas developed Augustine's ideas further by suggesting that the sensitive souls responsible for the life in animals and the emotional expression are nonetheless non-eternal. This is because in Aquinas, the souls of animals die along with their bodies. However, modern theologians have reinterpreted the argument of Aquinas to question whether those sensitive souls really differ so much from human souls. According to theologian Andrew Lindsay, it interprets the ability of animals to experience emotions, such as love and joy. Therefore, it indicates that it is a more interesting soul than Aquinas had believed. Andrew Lindsay is one of the most important voices in what has come to be called animal rights theology. He insists that God's love encompasses all the creatures, not human beings alone, and that animals should be brought into theological reflections on life after death. In his book, Animal Theology, Lindsay challenges the traditional view that restricts salvation and the afterlife to humans only, suggesting that God's redemptive plan might include all of creation. For Lindsay, animals are not lesser beings, but part of God's subtle and precious creation. C.S. Lewis once conjectured upon the prospect of the possibility of animals in heaven in his book, The Problem of Pain. Lewis postulated that the animals may join God's renewed creation, particularly if they are so well associated with humans. As such, he reasoned that if God's intentions are to recreate all of creation, it may just be the case that animals will join that restoration process. Lewis was careful to point out that he was speculating, but his ideas have brought comfort to many who find themselves in agreement with the possibility of a heavenly reunion with their pets. Animals and other religious beliefs. Many world religions differ in ideas as to what happens after death. While Christianity, Islam, and Judaism tend to focus on humans when it comes to the question of what happens after death, Eastern religions like Hinduism and Buddhism give specific teachings regarding the spiritual journey of animals. In Hinduism, reincarnation is a principle applied not just to human beings but to all living things. In Hindu thought, all life forms undergo the process of samsara, or the round of birth, death, and rebirth. Animals can be reincarnated with other animals, or for that matter with humans, depending on their earned karma. According to scholar Anantanand Rambachan, in Hindu tradition, animals are thought of as spiritual forms caught in the same round as humans. This belief comforts people who have lost a pet by assuring them that their death is not really an end, but rather a transition. Buddhism also teaches that animals are part of the cycle of rebirth, and they too can reach enlightenment, just as humans can. The Dalai Lama has often spoken on the issue of compassion toward all living things, including animals. In Buddhist philosophy, every living thing with sentience is en route to spiritual development, and animals are no different. Many Buddhists feel that upon the death of a pet, it will be reborn and continue its spiritual path either as another animal or, in the case of good karma, as a human. In most Native American spiritual traditions, Animals were seen as being imbued with spirits that outlived their physical body. For example, in the Lakota tradition, all animals are said to possess spirits that continued on after their bodies had died. Animals often act as teachers, guides, and messengers between the human and spirit world. In this case, when a pet dies, his or her spirit goes to the earth or to the spirit world, where he or she continues helping the soul or guiding the past owner. What C.S. Lewis thought about animals in the afterlife. C.S. Lewis, one of the most influential Christian thinkers of the 20th century, grappled with the same feelings and has helped millions of pet owners who lost their loved one friends feel better. In his book, The Problem of Pain, Lewis speculated that animals could be a part of God's renewed creation. Lewis supposed that since animals were included in God's creation, they also could be included in the new creation spoken about in the Bible. He felt of the opinion that animals might receive some sort of eternal life, especially if they had been closely related to humans. In Lewis's mind, the concept of God's love was broad enough to encompass the creatures. He nevertheless realized that the Bible does not really address this issue. Lewis also dealt with the wider aspect of redemption, claiming that Christ's redemptive work may extend to all creation. Romans 8:19-22 speaks of how creation groans to be redeemed, and that would mean God's plan in salvation is not confined to humans, but extends to all creation. To Lewis, this could be taken to mean even animals will be redeemed and restored in the new heaven and new earth, since they are part of God's good creation. The emotional side of losing a pet. The emotional impact of losing a pet is devastating. Pets are often considered part of the family, and their loss brings into focus deep feelings of grief. This chapter will look at the emotional side of pet loss and outline some guidelines on how to cope with it. Studies have shown that the pain individuals go through in regard to the death of a pet is in no way less than what people face in the loss of a loved human. As Dr. Sandra Barker, a psychologist who studies the human-animal bond, said, "It's because pets love us unconditionally, and when they die, there's an emotional void. This can often catch people by surprise, even when one does not realize how deep the attachment is." Coping with the death of a loved pet can be done myriad ways. One method is by memorializing, planting a tree in memory, making a photo album, or in some other fashion, memorializing the deceased. Another approach is to attend a pet loss support group, because sometimes talking to people who experience this unique pain helps. If the grief is overwhelming, therapy may help. Honoring a pet's memory can provide closure. Some people have a memorial service to honor their pet, while others like a more personal tribute, like writing a letter to the pet or creating a photo album. These rituals help the grieving pet owner acknowledge their loss and find peace in their memories. Hope of reuniting with pets in the afterlife. One of the comforting ideas that people can have pertains to being reunited with their pets upon dying. The idea of this varies from one religious or philosophical tradition to another, but generally speaking, reunion causes hope among many in beliefs. According to the book of Revelation, the Apostle John beheld a new heaven and a new earth, in which God would be with his people and make all things new. This passage, along with several others, is interpreted by several theologians, such as N.T. Wright, as evidence of restoration into the new earth of all creation, including animals. To those who believe in an afterlife, this gives the real possibility that pets may be part of God's renewed creation, where there is no longer suffering or death. The prophet Isaiah shows a glimpse into a time when animals can coexist peacefully. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat. Isaiah 11:6. Some theologians have gone as far as to speculate that animals will be part of redeemed creation based on this vision of harmony among animals. While Isaiah's prophecy does not answer the direct question of whether individual pets will go to heaven, it gives an insight into the times to come whereby there is a place for animals in God's kingdom. For many, though, there is a comforting thought that in the afterlife, they will again be reunited with their pets. Part of this could be due to ideas that God's love extends to all creation. Thus, the love they had developed with their pets was not earthly at all. Obviously, one will never know, but the hope brings some consolation to those who have lost a dear pet. What scholars say about the afterlife for pets. Through the ages, Academics, scholars, and theologians have presented many opinions on what happens to animals when they die. This chapter looks at some of the most influential voices in the debate. The early fathers of the Church, such as Gregory of Nazianzus, insisted that God's pity extends to the whole of creation. This father of the Church viewed animals as the good creation of God, and therefore, they deserved divine care and consideration. Though Gregory did not say that animals enter heaven, from his writings one gets the suggestion that animals are valuable in the sight of God, and possibly they might share in the future restoration of creation. One of the leading contemporary theological and ethical voices on behalf of the inclusion of animals within the love of God is Andrew Lindsay. In his book Animal Theology, Lindsay argues against the traditional view that animals do not have souls and that God's love does not extend to them. Lindsay's arguments have greatly encouraged people to rethink their conception of animals and how they might be included in God's redemptive plan. John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, declared that animals would be part of the new creation. God's mercy and compassion extended to all of creation, including animals, was his argument. Since animals were included in the first creation, it was at least possible they would be part of the restored creation, he held. This has been a comforting view for many Methodists and others who believe in some sort of afterlife for animals. Exploring the afterlife. Through the eyes of different philosophies, like theologians, philosophers also have various theories concerning the nature of the soul, consciousness, and what happens after death. Some of these are quite interesting in relation to the question of whether animals have an afterlife. René Descartes viewed life in dualistic form. That much separation exists between the body and the soul. Whereas in animals, he was completely opposed to the idea of their possessing souls, just a semblance of biological machinery ruled by instinct. Though his thoughts were influential, many modern philosophers like Mary Midgley are still opposing Descartes' argument on whether animals actually do lack souls or consciousness. The latter opinion gets much elaboration in recent philosophical debates as panpsychism, the belief that consciousness is a fundamental and ubiquitous feature of the world. According to some interpretations by philosophers such as David Skirbina, if all things are imbued with consciousness, then animals must at least participate in some form of eternal consciousness. While this opinion does not really support any notion of a traditional afterlife, it does provide many ways in which consciousness could survive death. Emotional healing. After pet loss, grieving may be quite heavy upon the death of one's pet, but one can find ways for healing and peace at this challenging time. The present chapter contemplates how to recover emotionally if a dear pet has died. Grief is a reaction to a loss, and a reaction to the loss of a pet can manifest in many ways: sadness, anger, and even guilt. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who proposed the 5 stages of grief, herself realized that owners who have lost pets experience all kinds of emotions just like people who have lost human loved ones. It may be important toward healing for them to recognize that their grief is a normal response. People also find holding a memorial service or creating a special ritual in honor of their pet helpful. Activities such as planting a tree in the name of the pet, creating a photo album, and even writing a letter to the pet help the individual work with and come to some resolve on their grief. Memorialization, according to Dr. Alan Wolfelt, a well-known grief counselor, is a way of keeping the memory alive. For individuals in whom the grief of a lost pet becomes hard to deal with, therapy might offer a space to work through some of those emotions. Pet loss support groups may be another potential avenue toward healing, allowing an individual to share feelings with others who have experienced similar losses. This may help an individual find validation and understanding where perhaps other people would minimize such losses. Pastoral care and the loss of pets. Following the death of a pet, people will often contact their faith leaders for guidance and support. Pastoral care can do much to support individuals as they work through their grief and find some comfort in their spiritual beliefs. Pastors and priests often refer to Scripture to provide solace when one is grieving a pet. The Bible does not give an explicit answer as to the fate of animals. However, many faith leaders center their discussion on those passages that reveal God's love and care for all creation. One can use prayer, to help bring peace and reassurance during a time of grief. Probably one of the biggest messages of pastoral care about such an issue is to trust in God's plan, though details may not be precisely known. More often than not, faith leaders invite individuals to believe that God's love for His creation is greater than anything we can ever comprehend, and our pets are part of that creation. Belief in divine love and divine justice may bring peace to those when definite answers cannot be provided. Some churches have begun to offer pet memorial services so that grieving pet owners can come together in a somber celebration of their lost companions. They provide a venue where one can openly grieve the loss, accept it, and receive spiritual solace. They impress a very vital notion that the animals are part of God's creation and should be remembered and taken care of. Do animals have a place in heaven? Theological reflections. Whether or not animals go to heaven has always been one of the fascinating theological debates. The present chapter further debates theological reasoning behind the possibility of animals being part of heaven. Romans 8:19-22 speaks of creation groaning in anticipation of redemption, indicating an unqualified redemption of creation when Christ comes. Theologians like N.T. Wright take this to imply that the animals of this world will finally have their day in redemption and go beyond being merely caretakers for God. This gives hope to some that the animals will be welcomed into the new heaven and new earth when all suffering and death is abolished. Theologians such as St. Francis of Assisi considered that animals hold a privileged place in God's heart, and this view has found success among Christians in more modern times. For example, St. Francis was well known to love animals and consider all life tied through God's love. Although the Catholic Church traditionally follows the teachings of Aquinas, who reasoned that animals are without eternal souls, the influence of St. Francis led to a greater appreciation for animals as spiritual beings. For instance, in Christian theology, God's means of redemption to fallen humanity is through Christ's death and resurrection, while other theologians see this not limited to humans alone, but intended for all creation. Lindsay's animal rights theology avers that the redemptive work of God is not only towards humans, but similarly extended to animals. This thought finds more support among people who believe that animals will be part of the renewed creation. Reincarnation in animals in Eastern religions. Eastern religions present a different proposition regarding the state of the animal's condition upon death. Reincarnation, indeed, forms the orthodox foundation upon what happens to animals when they die in both Hinduism and Buddhism. Samsara refers to the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth that every animal throughout the universe experiences, according to Hinduism. Animals would be reincarnated into other forms of animals, or even as humans depending on their karma. This comfort pertains to the belief that pets will not exactly pass out of existence, but go on further in other forms. Buddhism teaches that all living beings, including animals, are capable of attaining enlightenment. Animals are in subjection to the wheel of birth and death, and their actions in life, just like humans, impact their karmas to determine their subsequent rebirth. Recently, the Dalai Lama addressed showing compassion toward animals because they too are fellow travelers in the circle of spirituality. For those Buddhists who believe in reincarnation, the pet's death does not signify an end, but a mere passing into another form of life. Mystery to the afterlife. Despite all religious and philosophical utterances over what happens in the afterlife, it remains one of the biggest mysteries that exist. While science has little to say on what exactly happens afterward, faith and belief do provide a way in which this mystery can be perceived with hope and peace. As theologian Karl Rahner once explained, faith means believing in what we cannot see. When trying to learn what happens when pets die, it is crucial that such faith in things unseen is paramount. Though there may not be an absolute answer, it can definitely be a comforting feeling, knowing God's love encompasses all. Rather than speculating on events occurring after death, many find comfort in the memories of pets. Those pets can fill our lives with love and times of joy worth their acknowledgement, things that actually can heal us. Even if we don't know what happens after life, we can celebrate with thankfulness the moments we shared with them. What happens to our pets once they pass away is a deeply personal question ultimately. It reassures the great many of us who are in grief of their loss to believe that, through faith, philosophy, or even emotional contemplation, there will be some form of reunion. Everyone's grief is different, finding comfort in knowing their cherished pets await them in heaven. Others in cherished memories, still others in the idea of reincarnation. What we can hold on to is the love and joy our pets brought into our lives. That love does not fade with death. It remains with us, a constant reminder of the bond we shared. Sorting through emotions, seeking hope in some instances, one takes comfort knowing God loves all of His creation deeply, and that will include pets. Whatever the answer may be, the love that you shared with your pet is always with you. And be sure to check out our next video entitled 10 Signs Angels Have Been Visiting You, and you won't want to miss it. If you liked this video, thumbs up, subscribe, and share with others who might find a little comfort in it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.